Listening. Listening is being able to be changed by the other person. That's what we're trying to do here today. Alan Alda, the great American actor and renowned science communicator, for those of you who didn't know he was, made this simple but profound observation in the first 5 months of my administration. I hope it's been clear that the president of your union, as your president of this union, that I'm listening, and ALPA is changing, and changing for the better. Even before I took office, we reached out to all ALPA MEC leaders to ask their pilots top issues. That was my executive administrator's first task, I believe. We listened and responded quickly to our members' direction. You put a priority on greater transparency and inclusiveness, and so have I. One way that I hope it's clear that I'm listening and responding to your feedback is the changes we've made to the format of this executive board, and even in the layout of this room, as I indicated earlier. We've done away with the small breakout sessions and discussions. Most of our agenda here today will now take place in plenary to invite open dialogue and vigorous debate. However, each of you must be a partner and a full participant in order for this to be a successful gathering of our union's executive board. To succeed, we all need to be fully engaged and giving 100%. We need to view obstacles as stepping stones, and we need to deliver for our members. Now today, here in this room, we are all ALPA pilots, not passenger or cargo pilots, not mainline or regional or US or Canadian. But we do have specific concerns about our individual careers and our work together flying the line. That's why I place such a high priority on hearing from you directly regarding the issues that matter to you the most. And I want to continue to hear from you during this meeting and certainly in the future. Now, one thing I heard from you loud and clear over and over again is the importance of unity. We all know that. In this room and across the union, our members have many reasons to feel deeply united. For one thing, each of you has chosen to serve as a labor leader in this union. And to a person, each of us is passionate about unionism. Off script here just a little bit, I looked up the word passion. I don't know if you've ever done that, but the earlier use actually means sacrifice. That's the term that was always used when associated with passion. And you know, if you've done union work, that you will sacrifice. And it is hard, but it's often said it's the hard that makes it great, because you're doing a service to your fellow pilots. Now, I'm honored at this particular meeting that we're going to be joined by Secretary of Labor, Alexander Acosta, who will speak to us tomorrow. Let me tell you how that happened. ALPA sits on the Labor Advisory Committee, and I actually really didn't realize this until I was invited to go. And I was asked to opine on the USMCA, or the renegotiation, Trump's attempt to renegotiate the NAFTA agreement, North American Trade Agreement. And of course, I related a lot what was in the agreement to our experiences in aviation, relayed some of that many times many things can be in an agreement, but without real enforcement and monitoring language in the agreement, that's the real sticker, and how important that was for us in aviation. And I started to talk about the challenges that we face with ME3 and flags of convenience and atypical employment models. That led to a glance from Acosta, who said, hey, let's take that offline. And then afterwards we had a discussion. When people meet pilots, they just absolutely love to talk to pilots. They really do. He sort of caught us and asked me more questions about the Boeing 737 MAX than anything else. But we started to talk, and I could tell he was very eager to share his views about aviation. And I remember he said to me, he said, you guys, ALPA does such an amazing, fantastic job with safety. He said, when I get in an airplane, I don't even think about flying. I said, that's not a mistake. That's through hard work and sacrifice and the way we do things in terms of having an advanced risk predictive model now. And I kind of explained the whole aviation ecosystem to him and how we went from a forensic approach to accident investigation to a risk predictive model. But it became so engaged in the conversation. I said, you know, you and I, and before I even finished the subject, he said, let's do it. So we scheduled a dinner, and it just so happened he picked one of my favorite restaurants here in town, Central. And that led to even more of a conversation once he arrived. You know, he had his security folks sitting in clear fields of fire, and I had Nick Giel, who I know very well from when he was with the NMB, worked on my contract at FedEx. And it was just a relaxed but engaging discussion about the issues. We talked about the visa issues. We talked about, of course, ME3 and Qatar. He was shocked at some of that stuff, but knew about it very deep and had given me some really good information about what the administration is trying to do to rectify that situation. But all in all, it just, when I said, you know, and I was trying to be very polite, and I said, I would just absolutely love for you to come and speak to our group, and I just imagine, you know, given your circumstances and your position, that you would want a much larger group. You know, we have the BOD. And he said, no, I don't care. I would love to come and speak to your group. And then Nick chimed in and said, well, this is the executive board. This is the leaders of the association, the master chairman from all 33 airlines. So he was sold. And so hopefully he'd be here. And I just want to let you know, too, he's in South America right now, in Bogota. And when he told me, because he said, you know, I'm coming back from Bogota. And I thought, well, I wonder if this is like personal visit or is this something important? Because I know the struggle that the Avianca pilots have gone through. And he said, no, this is about establishing improved labor conditions down in Colombia. So he had me at hello on that one. And that led to another. So he'll be here tomorrow, and I'm really pleased to see you. That's a cabinet member. All right, it's a presidential cabinet member. Also, I want to let you know that Secretary Chow, DOT Secretary, has indicated that she'd like to attend Air Safety Forum. So we're out there and we're collaborating, and they pick up on that vibe, and it's been a really collaborative experience. So, and it's wholly fitting as we are not only the voice for all airline pilots, but for our brothers and sisters across all of labor. Remember, that's our big, the connectivity that we're trying to demonstrate in everything that we do here in the United States, in Canada, in Ireland, the United Kingdom, in Europe, and throughout the world. And I've said it many times, but I believe in my heart deeply that unions are the social glue that join the left and the right. You know, you have the far right and the far left, and it was always strong unions that took a common sense, practical approach and put both of those extremes into effect with accountability. The well-off and the not so well-off, the young and the old. The unity that results empowers us to all speak with one true voice. And despite differences, be it politics, geography, or experience, your new ALPA is leading boldly on the issues facing us and our profession, particularly in the three key areas of fair competition, concerns for our pilots at small to medium-sized carriers. Yes, that was a promise fulfilled. And safety and security, particularly in the area of achieving one level of safety for cargo pilots. So let me start for a moment with one example of the power of our unity. As airline pilots and ALPA members, we are respected, of course, by our passengers and our cargo shippers. It is our responsibility to stand up for safety. We are the voice of safety, 87 years of that, past, present, and future. The government shutdown that went on in Washington presented, as bad as it was, presented an opportunity. We can't predict what will come our way. We can predict How will we react to our challenges? That we can control. It could have seriously affected the safe, secure, and efficient operation of flights. I was particularly worried about the risk predictive model and whether or not I could see into that model to see if there were new emerging threats. But again, rather than seeing that as an obstacle, ALPA mobilized and used the shutdown as a stepping stone to not only put safety first, but also to bring labor, industry, and regulators together. ALPA was the first ones out of the box to count on this. This is when I ended up doing the CNN piece. We were in front and we were leading with a measured, calm, analytical voice. That's what we do, and that's what we've become known for. That's why they do collaborate with us. The decision to end the shutdown came about in large part due to the collective effort of labor. Phone calls, let me just say that phone calls were being made with top officials at that time, calling here to learn what our opinion. They know the power of the PIC, trust me, and they know the reputation of ALPA. And they would call regularly. As a matter of fact, they're still calling to talk about some of these issues, particularly the shutdown, which could happen again in October, or the Boeing 737 MAX. So together, we called on lawmakers to reinstate federal resources for aviation safety and security. We also stood up for our brothers and sisters who had been asked to do their jobs without pay for more than a month. Now, I always said that, and I said that in all the interviews. And as a labor leader, right, I don't think having somebody forced to go to work and not being paid is a great idea. We all know that in aviation there's one thing that's a killer, and that's distractions. So I can't think of a worse thing than having to come to work without being paid. I don't want my air traffic controllers doing that. I don't want the people that work on the equipment I just don't expect. I wouldn't expect that out of you. I don't think you'd stand for it. So some air traffic controllers, I know for a fact, and TSA security officers suffered the indignity of having to sleep in their cars because they couldn't afford to pay the toll to get to and from work. And yet, when we brought them food and visited with them, smiles, total professionalism, not a bit of whining, not a bit of whining. And, you know, it really, when I saw some articles in paper with, you know, you can't account for everybody's opinions on this kind of stuff, but I heard there was one particular article that used a term that almost like these public servants were somehow less than human. Like they didn't have real jobs. Well, folks, let me tell you, these people were working really, really hard. And when, you know, people throw around that word patriot pretty loosely these days, to me, keeping our system safe the way they did with what they had under that kind of pressure, that's a patriot in my view. So, now I personally, like I said, went around contacting administration officials, both at the TSA and the FAA, and lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle, and helped lead an industry coalition in an effort to call on Congress and the President to take immediate action to reopen the government. When we penned that letter to the President, that did catch a little attention. We don't do that very often, but we did. And I'm also in the process of penning a letter to get in there. I want to have a discussion with President Trump because there's a lot of issues. We've made a lot of progress. We have made a lot of progress. We stand together on a few issues. Made some contact through some of the folks that I've known through these other contacts with direct access into the first family. And I think it's going to lead to something very positive. I really do. In addition, we showed our strong support for our brothers and sisters at NATCA and TSA, along with other aviation workers. ALPA served notice to the government leaders that the pilot's voice must be heard when we call for long-term, stable funding and for the federal government and financial stability for hardworking Americans who keep our skies safe and secure. Take note, our leadership may require that we do this again. The end of the fiscal year approaches as we roll into September. So we'll see what happens. But we'll be ready. We'll be ready, and we'll be the voice of aviation again. And hopefully There'll be some common sense. We'll show the same collaboration and resolve in the first of our three key areas, ensuring that U.S. and Canadian airlines have a fair opportunity to compete. I mean, right now, there's no question. You look at what's going on at Qatar, you want to talk about having your thumb on the scale. We'll get into that here a little bit. But airline pilots are more interconnected than ever when it comes to international labor issues affecting our profession, be it the threat of subsidized foreign airlines, atypical employment models, or flag of convenience. Pilots in both the United States and Canada work together under a unified national regulatory legal framework, an advantage that many of the world's pilots don't enjoy, and one that many factors that have allowed atypical employments to flourish. Now, when we had the leadership training conference, which how many people went to the last one? Anybody in here? You saw Evan Cullen, right? President of Irish ALPA. He came here. I wanted him to come because, you know, Bill, the leadership conference just keeps getting better and better and better every year. And having Evan there, because I wanted them to see not only this massive toolbox that ALPA gives our elected officials to use as a resource, I wanted to talk about what it's like to sit in your seat when you have two bad choices to choose from, when it's not a good day, when it's time to make a gut-wrenching decision. Evan's been through the mill. If you know anything about the Ryanair pilots and their struggle and what they're dealing with there with 85 separate bases and a pretty anti-union company, you'll know what I mean. But he spoke very candidly about, he said, you know, I hear you folks talk about wanting to do away with or change the Railway Labor Act. He said, be careful what you ask for, he said, because we'd kill for that where we are. And I don't think there's not a coincidence with the fact that in our industry we have upwards of 90% people unionized. And under the National Labor Relations Act, we've seen the high of 35%, and a few decades later we're down at 7%. I don't think that's, you know, that's not related. So, but atypical employment appears in different forms. It might be working under individual temporary contracts with an airline, through an employment agency, or as purportedly a self-employed individual. Actually create an entity that you are a managing director in to work. It's management's coming up with these incredibly creative ideas, devious as they are, to put as much space as they can between employers and employees and employers, where you have no voice, essentially no voice at all. So rather than the dignity that comes with a stable career, these pilots go to work knowing their job could disappear at any time. Because O'Leary will shut down, if he sees any union activity in one of those bases, he shuts down the base. And here's your choice. Go to another base, completely different contract, maybe a different country, right? Or you're fired, or you just don't have a job. I referred to it as basically, he's involved in social dumping. He's creating unstable work environment, models for people, injecting them into these different societies. That does no. Where does that benefit anybody? It puts a burden on society, as a matter of fact. Collective bargaining, the godsend when it comes to stuff. It creates stable careers, stable finances, understanding between and agreement between everybody. Accountability, right? So I believe that, but more essentially, I believe that denying workers the right to organize is an attack on human dignity itself. We talked about the dignity of work, right, during the early times in my administration here. And it's true. When you meet somebody, they don't ask you what you did on vacation. They ask you what you do. Because what you do matters. It matters your self-esteem, where you find yourself in society, where you place yourself. So, and I believe that ALPA needs to stand strong and speak out against such exploitation by management. We must stand in solidarity with airline pilots across the globe on this critical dignity of work issue. Now, let me tell you something that I saw, and I saw it when we went to ALPA in Berlin. Union solidarity and work dignity knows no boundaries or borders. It transcends that. workers are connected. The indisputable power of union representation, along with the full engagement of union members, is the solution for the world's pilots as we work together to improve the safety of our industry. As ALPA works to inspire more people to become pilots to ensure an adequate pilot supply, our highly trained aviators, we must do more to attract women and individuals from diverse backgrounds to join our profession. We must break down the barriers and open doors because we know that a broader union membership is the key to the future of our piloting profession. And while atypical employment model is one area in which ALPA is fighting for fair competition, we are more focused than ever on the massive subsidies that the governments of the United Emirates and Qatar provide to their state-owned airlines. This is, I said this over and over again, this is our largest and greatest existential threat. We can't lose this. We don't have a fight. We don't have a choice. Your back's up against the wall. We could lose all that great stuff that we got in FAA reauthorization. Forget it if this wins. So the unfair foreign subsidies issue has recently taken form in Air Italy, which has operated its flights since 2017 with aircraft and financing provided by the government of Qatar through its state-owned airline. In financial statements, Qatar Airways appears to cover Air Italy's operating losses. The airline's operations depend on capital provided by Qatar Airways and are made possible with cash received from the Qatari government. In addition, Qatar Airways has supplied Air Italy with A330 aircraft from its own fleet, going so far as to repaint the planes in Air Italy's livery. So, ownership rules, 49%. But on top of that, get this, money's flowing, and now moving equipment. And we've got pictures of airplanes that were sitting under Qatar colors, same airplane, now sitting on a ramp over in Italy. Pretty audacious. These facts make clear that Air Italy's flights not only violate the open skies provision requiring fair and equal competition, but also the government of Qatar's high-level political commitment to the U.S. government promising it would not introduce additional U.S.-EU services to the United States, a practice, as you all know, is Fifth Freedom. In a February letter to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao, I made it clear that this sleight of hand effort by Qatar to serve U.S. markets through Air Italy as a proxy threatens U.S. airlines and U.S. jobs. And we're not going to stand for it. Made it very clear. In what could become a breakthrough in ALPA's fight, cabinet-level U.S. government officials, one of whom, like I said, will be here tomorrow, now say that they will scrutinize whether Qatar has lived up to its high-level political commitment to the United States, pledging to compete fairly with U.S. airlines. We'll see. And the strength of more than 62,000 pilots will help ensure that they will follow through on that pledge. And right now, we talked about some new IT and communications efforts. I'm hoping to very soon, if you carry this around with you and you have an ALPA app on it, you'll be able to get push notifications about this issue and many more. Our line pilots, we need to continue to connect with our line pilots. That's the key. As promised before I took office, my first official act and my first full day as ALPA president was to bring together pilots and staff to begin planning one of our flagship projects called Pilot Career Development Initiative, from recruitment to retirement. If you remember, during the campaign, there was a lot of concern. The demographics within ALPA are changing. There's real, there's some, where's Jim Johnson? The flow is so quick. I mean, it's tough to staff. It's tough to do just about anything. There's some unique challenges in our medium to small carriers, but there are also concerns in many of our larger carriers. I know many of our larger carriers, you want to get into the retirement issue since it's recruitment to retirement. Let's face it, many of our pilots saved their airlines through their reduction in retirement security. We need to look at that. This initiative focuses on our second key area, the careers of pilots at small to mid-sized carriers. And as union members, any issue that affects one of us affects all of us. And that's what we're here today to do, to share with one another and understand and listen. So one of the more innovative aspects of this initiative is our history-making pilot peer support program, which I was proud to champion as your first vice president. This support network connects ALPA members with trained pilot peers to talk about personal and professional problems, while pilot groups at Delta, FedEx, Express, and United, as well as Canadian pilot assistants, have had airline-specific programs, which, by the way, are considered the gold standard because these are people who live your life, fly your schedules, they know you. That's your peer, right? But some of our MECs, due to their size or limited resources, simply can't do that. They just don't have the resource to do it. So I set out to ensure that all ALPA pilots have 24/7 access to this valuable resource. And this all began, John Taylor, you in this room? You around? Ellen Brinks? All right. John is our PA chair. Ellen Brinks is the aeromedical chair who oversees this. And after I was in the pilot fitness arc after the German wings accident, this is where this all began. We have a really robust PA set of programs, aeromedical, HIM, CIRP, and pro stands. But what was missing was a pathway for people to come forward with non-work related stresses. So this is quite a big deal, not only here in the United States, Canada, and everywhere else, but also globally. And FAA is thrilled about it because it shows, once again, ALPA didn't wait around for somebody to solve a problem. We took the bull by the horns and got some fantastic help from AMAS, Dr. Snyder, and Suzanne Capt. Suzanne, you're in the room over here. She's, all I could say is during the pilot fitness arc, I remember when things started to get a little off track and they started to look at more scrutiny on pilots. And I gave the opinion of, I said, you know, we have the most heavily scrutinized profession in the world. Show me one other profession other than ours that, you know, gets scrutinized the way we do. And, but when I was running into a little trouble, I got a little whisper in my ear from Keith Hagee. And so I said, hey, listen, I've got somebody that could help with this issue. Her name is Suzanne Capt. And I heard a collective sigh in the room from everybody, like, oh, God, that was the end of that. She shut that down right away. So she did a fantastic job. So we have a second brand new program coming to support pilots at all levels for resources, but mainly dealing with the medium and small size carriers, and that's the DART program, courtesy of Bob Fox and United. Thank you, Bob. It's a super program. Anybody who doesn't have the type of structures that the larger organizations have can ask a question if a pilot has a problem. The software knows where to go and who to contact, everybody from the EVPs on down on all the pilot structures and the committees and everything, and also to the staff. Fantastic. Another issue that ALPA pilots employed by smaller carriers are concerned about is the ability to attract the next generation of pilots and to ensure solid career progression and retirement. At this executive board, we have a panel on that very subject. It's the next opportunity for us to develop the solutions needed and ensure that we speak with one voice about the future of our profession. On our third key area, we see another clear benefit of collective bargaining agreements, a stronger safety culture. And let's face it, most of the safety things that you see in our industry today would not be here without ALPA. No question about it. Unions make that happen. Through data-driven decisions by highly trained and experienced pilots, many of which are in the room I'm seeing around here, and other workers, unionism helps make possible the risk predictive model for air transportation that is taking the global industry to the next level of safety. Regardless of where we fly or what we carry, ALPA pilots know that the strongest safety asset on any flight is the presence of at least two fully qualified, highly trained, experienced, and well-rested pilots in the cockpit. Bottom line. You know, in that single pilot ops thing I'm about to talk about. During the 74th conference of the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations, we helped lead the world's pilots in affirming our opposition to reduced crew operations. Every airline pilot recognizes that these operations carry significant additional risks over existing dual pilot operations. I felt proud that so many ALPA leaders were able to join us. It was a clear display of ALPA's inclusiveness and unity, as well as the unity of pilots around the world. So question, how many people were there? Okay, great, good, more than before. How many people have ever gone? How many people have not gone? Yeah, all the rest of you, right? Okay, so, look, here's the deal. We said we were going to be more inclusive, and one chairman, Andy, made a comment. He said in his 30 years in this union, 30 plus years in this union, he'd never been to an ALPA conference. You've never seen the deliberation, never heard what went on there. Here we are in a global environment, right? We're in a global economy. We just talked about the connectiveness of union labor and workers' concerns, and he's a member of the executive board. Never been here. This is, in my view, unconscionable, and in my opinion, requires a reexamination of our priorities and resources as a union, especially in this economy. So we do know this. Humans remain the essential part of safety equation on the flight deck, using judgment, experience, and training to troubleshoot dynamically changing situations. ALPA has highlighted the safety value of having at least 2 pilots in the cockpit, a fact that has been supported by the safe outcome of tens of thousands of flights every day. Cargo operations and cargo security in particular are one example of where our industry is dismissing risk and ignoring the value of one level of safety and security. Unlike passenger aircraft, many cargo aircraft are not required to be equipped with hardened flight deck doors. Imagine, just for a moment, having a speciously vetted foreigner, not a U.S. citizen, not foreigners are bad, I'm just saying a foreigner, not a U.S. citizen, with syringes and sedatives capable of taking down a large animal. And you're just right there. You might have an oxygen mask on, you might have, FFDO, you got your weapon at your hip. Who thought that was a good idea? Just no definition of what they do. I don't know if they drove the truck or they're a trained animal handler or who it is. But clearly, after 9/11, I saw what the reg looked like. I know what it reads. Just unacceptable. Other concerns exist regarding small cargo aircraft loading and unloading outside of the CETA areas and supernumeraries aboard cargo aircraft. All your passenger flights take place in the CETA, right? Some of our smaller carriers, it takes place out of the CETA. So, you could screen anything you want coming into the airplane, but once it has access to anybody that wants to walk up to the airplane without a 10-year criminal record history check, who knows, right? These risks, they're just unacceptable. This issue is near and dear. I know it's near and dear to my heart, but I know it holds importance for you all as we pursue one level of safety and security throughout the air transportation system, because I have news for you here. You're not safer because we're not. Okay, it's one system. This is an ecosystem that relies on the sum of its parts, okay? So no one's getting away. It weakens the entire system. For that reason, our union has held not one, but 2 meetings on this issue in just the first few months of this year. ALPA has convened cargo pilots from across the industry to develop common ground, areas of agreement, and discuss pathways forward. This same commitment stands for ALPA's work in flight time, duty time requirements. A sad fact, since the 117 carve-out many years, when the implementation took place in 13 or 14? I think part of 2010 FAA reauthorization, but it took a few years to implement. But still, no science-based flight time, duty time rules. If we truly believe in one level of safety, we understand the connectivity here, how do we let that stand? I've been working on that. So let me just tell you something. Being awake for 17 hours, this is an interesting fact, is equivalent to an approximate blood alcohol level of 0.05. We share the same airports. We do closely spaced parallel approaches. That largest tragedy that was averted in San Francisco when the Air Canada airplane almost landed on it by some astute and awake and aware United pilot said, hey, what's this guy doing? Might not have happened if that was FedEx pilot or somebody else that was cargo pilot sitting on that, parallel taxiway. But I've been there, I gotta tell you, it's not a pretty situation. There's times I've landed and woke up later on at 2 o'clock, because you always wake up at 2 o'clock, and went, I don't really know, really. Sometimes I just want to get on the ground. I just want to get in the bus, I want to get to a cool room with a bed and clean sheets. That was it. So, at an ALPA convened meeting, I explained my view that human physiology must determine the business model, not the other way around. You can't make my physiology and conform it and shove it in, my round physiology into that square peg. It doesn't work that way, right? So anybody who thinks that they've got a different idea how this can go down, trust me, the minute you admit you're different, the minute you say, yeah, you're right, we're carved out of 117, we'll just go away. Honestly, I got problems with that. I'm worried that defeats every other argument that I can make about one level of safety. You say you're different in one area, you're different in them all. So, no. Physiology does not vary based on payload of aircraft. Neither should it be that flight time, duty time, science-based rules differ. While commercial flying remains the safest mode of transportation in the world, and ALPA pilots have been integral in this accomplishment, the recent tragedies of Lion Air 610, Atlas Air 3591, the accident nobody's talking about, and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 remind us that there is still urgent work to do in safeguarding our skies in both passenger and cargo operations. ALPA deeply respects the thorough accident investigations that are underway. This proven, unbiased, and objective investigatory process has been developed at a terrible cost. And through it, we collect the factual data needed to drive regulatory and policy changes for a safer future. And I have to say, in the 737 MAX situation, being a former NSC, where mum was always the word until the reports came out, more stuff is being leaked out constantly that causes this feeding frenzy that you see going on right now. And it's just not the sane way to do business if you want an outcome. So I don't know, this is an unusual situation because we just don't find ourselves in situations where airplanes are down. Now we have to figure out how to bring it up. We also know that airline pilots in the United States and Canada are trained for life. The pilot in command is the ultimate arbiter of safety. You are the ultimate arbiter of safety. Whether it's the decision, and they ask this question all the time, let's come back at 737 MAX, or the decision to take off on an individual flight, I just compare it to in all flights that you take. You make the decision, right? It's not the first time you ever had to make a pilot in command decision. So I always say, airplane's safe to fly when ALPA pilots say it's safe to fly. Bottom line. That's the power that you have as a PIC. And no question, I don't know if you recall, but I did send a letter to the Secretary General of ICAO asking for a global review of minimum pilot training standards, because I just don't think, just take everything you just heard about, or you may have heard about the 737 MAX, and just look at the way you're trained compared to, say, an MPO pilot, right? And how you're trained if something goes wrong with the automation to do what you have to do to fly the airplane. But what happens if you don't have that? I'm in happy land when something goes wrong and I click it off and I just go, okay, it's me flying now, right? But if you're trained to go to the automation, I think there's an opportunity here to do something good. There's an opportunity to do shit. So finally, and this final thing, and I promise I'll wrap it up, the idea of space flight. I want to talk about commercial space for a little while. It's captivated humankind and airline pilots for many, many years. And it's because of our love of flight that ALPA pilots are helping lead an effort to ensure that spaceflight is both successful and safe, beginning with how we integrate all users into the national airspace system. The path to integration is simple: listening to one another and working together to create a safe future. Went to a ComStat, Commercial Space Transportation Advisory Committee for the FAA. After the talk, I realized that they had some issues. They opened the mic. I grabbed the mic and I suggested that would it be valuable to the folks there to have ALPA pilots facilitate a dialogue between commercial aviation and commercial space, to share what we've learned over the many, many years with them. And it's not like they're a new entrant, but they do have a new capability, an enhanced capability from technology. So instead of blocking off a huge swath of airspace, the way the FAA is doing it right now, and having A4A and all the airlines scream about the amount of fuel that it's taken to get around, and delays and your duty times and all those kinds of things, can we harness and grab the low-hanging fruit and more dynamically, manage that airspace? I believe we can. Of course, I won't get technical, but I mean, we operate at about a 10 to the minus 9 in terms of risk, and they're about a 10 to the minus 6 or less sometimes. So that's why they have to be segregated, right? But over time, as they collect more data and we help them do that and show them how to do it, that bubble will get smaller and smaller. But in the meantime, we still need to dynamically manage the airspace, and that's what I'm trying to do. The principles that I believe that must guide us are managing the national airspace system to the benefit of all Americans, because it's a shared resource. We don't own it. We just share it. Focusing on long-term goals of integrating rather than segregating space operations into the NAS, and ensuring spaceflight operations meet the same level of safety as other airspace users. So pretty simple, right? But you got to write. You got to have resource to do this, folks. President wants to do it. He's written 4 space directives in a short amount of time. All you have to do is fund it. Congress needs to fund the effort. So with these principles as a guide that I've talked about now, ALPA has worked to bring the commercial space and commercial aviation community together to listen and collaborate as we pursue our mutual goal of achieving safe and efficient access to our national airspace system. That's the reason why we're hosting a one-day symposium on commercial space in the fall. As men and women in this room who love to fly, I know we're all eager to see where the future of air transportation goes, particularly with this new capability, because I'm sure we'll be all interested in that suborbital flight between Chicago and Singapore. As the president of the Airline Pilots Association International, I'm confident that the aerospace industry can work together to maintain the high level of safety and efficiency that Americans expect and demand from U.S. air transportation. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the final thing. Again, listening is being able to be changed by the other person. I'm listening, and ALPA is changing. Thank you very much for your attention.